I'm Bernina expert Amanda Murphy, and I'd like to show you how to use my Good Measure every wedge cutting ruler set for Brewer sewing for blocks like Dresden plates or wagon wheels. It's a set of 4 rulers designed to make 12 wedge, 16 wedge, 20 wedge, and 24 wedge circles, respectively. Today, I'll be piecing my Circus quilt, which uses 2 different sizes of wedge shapes. For this quilt, I cut a 6.5 inch strip from which I'll cut the larger Dresden shapes. Then I use my wedge ruler, the 18-degree one in this case, to cut the individual shapes. And I like to cut one from the end just so I don't have to rotate the whole strip first, and then I continue down the strip. And I am cutting through 2 layers of fabric in this instance. So again, that 16-inch line is aligned with the raw edge of my strip every time I rotate the ruler. What that means is if I did a complete Dresden using that ruler, it would be 16 inches in diameter. Now I'm cutting the wider but smaller Dresdens for my quilt, so this is the 30-degree ruler, and I'm aligning the 8-inch line on the ruler with the edge of the strip. And that means if I made a complete Dresden shape, it would be 8 inches in diameter. Now it's time to assemble these shapes. So I fold each shape, each wedge, in half vertically, right sides together, and then I stitch along the edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I like to back stitch at each end so that the seam does not come out. I do lower my stitch length just a bit, maybe to a 2.2, something like that. And you can see I'm taking care to back stitch at both ends to form my Dresden plates. Once I've done that, I get rid of bulk by clipping off the corner. Be careful not to clip your stitches. And then I press that seam open. I'm using the Laura Star Smart U ironing system. Now I turn my Dresden plate right side out and poke out the point, being careful not to rip the stitches, and then I want to press it. I want to make sure that the seam is in the center of my Dresden, and I can check this using the lines on the ruler that I used to cut the shape. Next, it's time to sew my Dresden plates together. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam, and I did starch all the fabrics before I began. I like to do this especially with Dresden quilts because you're sewing on the bias sometimes and you have to be careful. It helps you not stretch those seams. So I'm just chain piecing them through, but you'll notice that at least on the outer edge of the shape, you should do a back stitch so it doesn't come out. The seam at the narrow end of the Dresden will of course be covered by a circle later. I sometimes still backstitch that, but it is absolutely imperative that you backstitch the outer edge right there. So I just chain piece my Dresdens together, and now I'm going to press the seam open to reduce the bulk. That's perfect, and a lot of times I will flip it over and give it a nice press from the front. Now I'll join the pairs of plates. So again, using a 1/4 inch foot, this is the 97 dual feed foot for my Bernina, and I just love it. And I chain piece them together, back stitching at least on the outer edge. Now it's time to press this seam open. I'm very careful not to distort or stretch the fabrics as I press the seam. And I do have the Laura Star here, so it has the super dry micro fine steam and it doesn't distort the fabric, but I'm still careful not to pull it as I press. So that's 4 Dresdens. I'm going to add a 5th since I'm stitching a 1/4 of a Dresden for this quilt. I'm almost done with my 1/4 Dresden. And of course, I like to chain piece to save time, so I have another one ready to go. And I'll take it to the Laura Star, and I'll press these seams open. It's very tempting to stretch the fabric, so make sure you don't do that. And that's how you stitch a Dresden plate using my wedge rulers. You can combine them in many different ways to make many different types of quilts. I can't wait to see what you create with the wedge rulers, so please share your work with me by tagging me at Amanda Murphy Design on Instagram or joining my Facebook group, Quilting with Amanda Murphy.